At some point, we realized that we needed the help of some power greater than our addiction. Our understanding of a higher power is up to us. No one is going to decide for us. We can call it the group, the program, or we can call it God. The only suggested guidelines are that this power be loving, caring, and greater than ourselves. We don't have to be religious to accept this idea. The point is that we open our minds to believe. We may have difficulty with this, but by keeping an open mind, sooner or later, we find the help we need. We talked and listened to others. We saw other people recovering, and they told us what was working for them. We began to see evidence of some power that could not be fully explained. Confronted with this evidence, we began to accept the existence of a power greater than ourselves. We can use this power long before we understand it. As we see coincidences and miracles happening in our lives, acceptance becomes trust. We grow to feel comfortable with our higher power as a source of strength. As we learn to trust power, we begin to overcome our fear of life. The process of coming to believe restores us to sanity. The strength to move into action comes from this belief. We need to accept this step to start on the road to recovery. When our belief has grown, we are ready for step 3. Step 3. We made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. As addicts, we turned our will and our lives over many times to a destructive power. Our will and our lives were controlled by drugs. We were trapped by our need for instant gratification that drugs gave us. During that time, our total being, body, mind, and spirit, was dominated by drugs. For a time, it was pleasurable. Then the euphoria began to wear off and we saw the ugly side of addiction. We found that the higher our drugs took us, the lower they brought us. We faced 2 choices. Either we suffered the pain of withdrawal or took more drugs. For all of us, the day came when there was no longer a choice. We had to use. Having given our will and our lives to our addiction, in utter desperation, we looked for another way. In Narcotics Anonymous, we decide to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand Him. This is a giant step. We don't have to be religious. Anyone can take this step. All that is required is willingness. All that is essential is that we open the door to a power greater than ourselves. Our concept of God comes not from dogma, but from what we believe and from what works for us. Many of us understand God to be simply whatever force keeps us clean. The right to a God of your understanding is total and without any catches. Because we have this right, it is necessary to be honest about our belief if we are to grow spiritually. We found that all we needed to do was try. When we gave our best effort, the program worked for us as it has worked for countless others. The 3rd step does not say, we turned our will and our lives over to the care of God. It says, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. We made the decision, It was not made for us by the drugs, our families, a probation officer, judge, therapist, or doctor. We made it. For the first time since that first high, we have made a decision for ourselves. The word decision implies action. This decision is based on faith. We have only to believe that the miracle that we see working in the lives of clean addicts can happen to any addict with the desire to change. We simply realize there is a force for spiritual growth that can help us become more tolerant, patient, and useful in helping others. Many of us have said, "Take my will and my life. Guide me in my recovery. Show me how to live." The relief of letting go and letting God helps us develop a life that is worth living. Surrendering to the will of our higher power gets easier with daily practice. When we honestly try, it works. Many of us start our day with a simple request for guidance from our higher power. Although we know that turning it over works, we may still take our will and life back. We may even get angry because God permits it. At times during our recovery, the decision to ask for God's help is our greatest source of strength and courage. We cannot make this decision often enough. We surrender quietly and let the God of our understanding take care of us. At first, our heads reeled with the questions, what will happen when I turn my life over? Will I become perfect? We may have been more realistic than this. Some of us had to turn to an experienced NA member and ask, what was it like for you? The answer will vary from member to member. Most of us feel open-mindedness, willingness, and surrender are the keys to this step. We have surrendered our will and our lives to the care of a power greater than ourselves. If we are thorough and sincere, we will notice a change for the better. Our fears are lessened, and faith begins to grow as we learn the true meaning of surrender. We are no longer fighting fear, anger, guilt, self-pity, or depression. We realize that the power that brought us to this program is still with us and will continue to guide us if we allow it. We are slowly beginning to lose the paralyzing fear of hopelessness. The proof of this step is shown in the way we live. We have come to enjoy living clean and want more of the good things that the NA Fellowship holds for us. We know now that we cannot pause in our spiritual program. We want all that we can get. We are now ready for our first honest self-appraisal, and we begin with Step 4. Step 4. We made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. The purpose of a searching and fearless moral inventory is to sort through the confusion and the contradiction of our lives so that we can find out who we really are. We are starting a new way of life and need to be rid of the burdens and traps that controlled us and prevented our growth. As we approach this step, most of us are afraid that there is a monster inside of us that, if released, will destroy us. This fear can cause us to put off our inventory, or may even prevent us from taking this crucial step at all. We have found that fear is lack of faith, and we have found a loving personal God to whom we can turn. We no longer need to be afraid. We have been experts at self-deception and rationalization. By writing our inventory, we can overcome these obstacles. A written inventory will unlock parts of our subconscious that remain hidden when we simply think about or talk about who we are. Once it is all down on paper, it is much easier to see, and much harder to deny our true nature. Honest self-assessment is one of the keys to our new way of life. Let's face it, when we were using, we were not honest with ourselves. We are becoming honest with ourselves when we admit that addiction has defeated us and that we need help. It took a long time to admit that we were beaten. We found that we do not recover physically, mentally, or spiritually overnight. Step 4 will help us toward our recovery. Most of us find that we were neither as terrible nor as wonderful as we supposed. We are surprised to find that we have good points in our inventory. Anyone who has some time in the program and has worked this step will tell you that the fourth step was a turning point in their life. Some of us make the mistake of approaching the fourth step as if it were a confession of how horrible we are, what a bad person we have been. In this new way of life, a binge of emotional sorrow can be dangerous. This is not the purpose of the fourth step. We are trying to free ourselves of living in old, useless patterns. We take the fourth step to grow and to gain strength and insight. We may approach the fourth step in a number of ways. To have the faith and courage to write a fearless inventory, steps 1, 2, and 3 are the necessary preparation. It is advisable that before we start, we go over the first 3 steps with a sponsor. We get comfortable with our understanding of these steps. We allow ourselves the privilege of feeling good about what we are doing. We have been thrashing about for a long time and have gotten nowhere. Now we start the fourth step and let go of fear. We simply put it on paper to the best of our present ability. We must be done with the past, not cling to it. We want to look our past in the face, see it for what it really was, and release it so that we can live today. The past for most of us has been a ghost in the closet. We have been afraid to open that closet for fear of what that ghost may do to us. We do not have to look at the past alone. Our wills and our lives are now in the hands of our higher power. Writing a thorough and honest inventory seemed impossible. It was as long as we were operating under our own power. We take a few quiet moments before writing and ask for the strength to be fearless and thorough. In step 4, we begin to get in touch with ourselves. We write about our liabilities such as guilt, shame, remorse, self-pity, resentment, anger, depression, frustration, confusion, loneliness, anxiety, betrayal, hopelessness, failure, fear, and denial. We write about the things that bother us here and now. We have a tendency to think negatively, so putting it on paper gives us a chance to look more positively at what is happening. Assets must also be considered if we are to get an accurate and complete picture of ourselves. This is very difficult for most of us because it is hard to accept that we have good qualities. However, we all have assets, many of them newly found in the program, such as being clean, open-mindedness, God awareness, honesty with others, acceptance, positive action, sharing, willingness, courage, faith, caring, gratitude, kindness, and generosity. Also, our inventories usually include material on relationships. We review our past performance and our present behavior to see what we want to keep and what we want to discard. No one is forcing us to give up our misery. This step has the reputation of being difficult. In reality, it is quite simple. We write our inventory without considering the 5th step. We work step 4 as if there were no step 5. We can write alone or near other people. Whatever is more comfortable to the writer is fine. We can write as long or as short as needed. Someone with experience can help. The important thing is to write a moral inventory. If the word moral bothers us, we may call it a positive-negative inventory. The way to write an inventory is to write it. Thinking about an inventory, talking about it, theorizing about the inventory will not get it written. We sit down with a notebook, ask for guidance, pick up our pen, and start writing. Anything we think about is inventory material. When we realize how little we have to lose and how much we have to gain, we begin this step. A basic rule of thumb is that we can write too little, yet we can never write too much. The inventory will fit the individual. Perhaps this seems difficult or painful. It may appear impossible. We may fear that being in touch with our feelings will trigger an overwhelming chain reaction of pain and panic. We may feel like avoiding an inventory because of a fear of failure. When we ignore our feelings, the tension becomes too much for us. The fear of impending doom is so great that it overrides our fear of failure. An inventory becomes a relief because the pain of doing it is less than the pain of not doing it. We learn that pain can be a motivating factor in recovery, thus facing it becomes unavoidable. Every topic of step meeting seems to be on the fourth step or doing a daily inventory. Through the inventory process, we are able to deal with all the things that can build up. The more we live our program, the more God seems to put us in positions where issues surface. When issues surface, we write about them. We begin enjoying our recovery because we have a way to resolve shame, guilt, or resentment. The stress once trapped inside of us is released. Writing will lift the lid off our pressure cooker. We decide whether we want to serve it up, put the lid back on it, or throw it out. We no longer have to stew in it. We sit down with paper and pen and ask for our God's help in revealing the defects that are causing pain and suffering. We pray for the courage to be fearless and thorough, and that this inventory may help us put our lives in order. When we pray and take action, it always goes better for us. We are not going to be perfect. If we were perfect, we would not be human. The important thing is that we do our best. We use the tools available to us, and we develop the ability to survive our emotions. We do not want to lose any of what we have gained. We want to continue in the program. It is our experience that no matter how searching and thorough, no inventory is of any lasting effect unless it is promptly followed by an equally thorough fifth step. Step 5. We admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. The fifth step is the key to freedom. It allows us to live clean in the present, sharing the exact nature of our wrongs